My name is Lila Moreno, and on the day I was supposed to say, I do, I exposed the man I once loved in front of everyone he hoped to impress. I had built the company he took credit for, the life he flaunted, and the future he betrayed. He thought I was fragile, quiet, devoted. What he didn't know was that I had been gathering every lie, every signature, every secret, waiting for the moment truth would speak louder than love. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The microphone hit the floor with a sharp clang, the sound echoing through the long reception hall decorated with white roses and soft golden lights. The guests fell silent all at once, their laughter freezing midair. Every gaze turned toward me, the bride, whose groom had just called her a burden in the middle of a toast. I sat motionless, my wedding dress clinging to my skin, lace trembling with every shallow breath I struggled to take. The room seemed to tilt, lights blurring into halos. The man I once believed I would grow old with stood before our families and friends, reveling in his own cruel joke, unaware that the humiliation he delivered was only a scene in a story I had written myself long before tonight. But that part comes later. I first met Adrian Hale one autumn afternoon, when the office windows were framed by leaves turning amber and gold. He arrived 10 minutes late to his interview, hair slightly tousled, shirt wrinkled, as if he had pulled it from the drier moments before rushing out. Yet when he walked into the room, he carried himself like someone who expected the world to bend for him. "I'm not perfect," he said with a tilted grin, "but if you choose me, I'll be the choice you'll never regret." At the time, my company was still small, only 8 of us in a brick building in downtown Eugene, working long nights and half-finished weekends. I had built it from almost nothing, fueled by instinct and sleepless determination. Then Adrian walked in, quick-witted, charming, effortlessly able to make clients relax with only a few words. I was disciplined, practical to a fault, always separating emotion from decisions. But his warmth felt like spring sunlight after a long winter I didn't realize I was still living in. He would stop by my desk every evening after work, always with 2 cups of coffee. "You're still here," he'd say softly, as if noting something rare. "Work doesn't finish itself," I'd reply. One night, when the office was quiet and the streetlights flickered outside, he leaned against my desk and murmured, "People only get used to loneliness when they forget how it feels to be loved." Then he left, as if the sentence wasn't meant to pierce straight through me. I still remember how my fingers froze on the keyboard, how my heart felt like it had been heard for the first time in years. Our feelings grew slowly. Shared lunches, long project planning sessions, quiet laughter in hallways no one else heard. And then, one night, his hand brushed mine. I didn't move away. He made me feel like I was allowed to be soft. He praised me for being strong, brilliant, relentless, always with a wistfulness that made me want to protect him. I mistook that tenderness for sincerity. As the company grew, I promoted him to creative director. I thought we were building a life, business and love intertwined. For a while, things were good. We traveled to conferences, presented proposals together, sat side by side envisioning the future. His admiration then was real, or at least convincing. But success is a strange thing. Once the company began attracting media attention, once Adrian's name started appearing in industry features, the warmth in his eyes faded into something cold and calculating. He began showing up late, always with convenient excuses. He rented an apartment across town for quiet work time. I pretended to believe him because believing hurt less than doubting. At events, he introduced me as Lila, a partner in the company, no longer mentioning that I was the founder. When I tried to fix his tie before a gala dinner, he brushed my hand away and whispered, "Don't do that. You make me look like a child." The words were light, but they struck with the weight of something breaking inside me. The first person who noticed was Rowan, his younger brother. Rowan was a quiet photographer who often dropped by to shoot promotional photos for us. One night, when I sat alone in the parking lot trying not to cry, he tapped on my car window. "If you stay silent," he said gently, "he'll think you aren't hurting." I tried to laugh, but it came out fragile. I'm used to being misunderstood. I told him. Rowan shook his head. "No, you're just used to carrying more than you should." After that, whenever I worked late, he would leave a cup of tea by my desk without saying a word. And I hated how safe it felt, safer than home. The turning point was the product launch. Adrian stood on stage, thanking partners, investors, staff. He never once mentioned me, not even in passing. I stood off stage, smiling politely, while inside something hollowed out. When the event ended, Rowan whispered to me, "Have you ever thought about walking away?" I didn't answer, but the question stayed. The shattering truth came soon after. I discovered that over $300,000 had been siphoned from the company accounts. Money Adrian had invested privately, hidden behind shell invoices and vague project codes. The betrayal was not the affair, not yet, but the fact that he had used everything I built to fund a future that did not include me. That night, he came home late, smelling of another woman's perfume. I asked him softly, "Are you happy, Adrian?" He kissed my cheek casually. "If you stopped doubting everything, we'd be happier." In that moment, I saw him clearly. I was not his partner. I was his stepping stone. So I began to prepare. I recorded every transfer, every message. I had legal documents re-examined. I revised ownership clauses he didn't bother to read. Rowan noticed the change in me, not bitterness, but clarity. "You're planning something," he said quietly. "I'm rewriting the ending," I replied. Adrian, sensing distance, grew sweet again. Flowers, breakfast in bed. But love that has died does not bloom again. While he slept, I sat alone under the lamplight, studying the share agreement he had already signed. One line, one clause, one shift, and everything with his name would return to mine. I once thought love made people strong, but what love truly teaches is endurance, silence, and finally, precision. And my revenge would not be loud. It would be inevitable. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a study in performance. Adrian walked around as though he had won some invisible prize, basking in attention and admiration that he had not earned. His mother, Evelyn Hale, was gracious in the way women of old money often are, polished, reserved, her smiles always hovering faintly above condescension. She had never believed I was good enough for her son, not because of who I was, but because of who I became without their help. I had built my success, while Adrian inherited his sense of entitlement. The difference irritated her quietly, yet I did not confront anyone. I did not rush, accuse, or demand. Revenge, when done with patience, does not break. It sinks in slowly, like reality finally dawning in a room where the lights have been dimmed for too long. I began with the documents. Our lawyer, a meticulous woman named Harper Fay, had helped me draft the initial company foundation documents years ago. When I approached her with my revisions, ownership transfers, profit rights, licensing adjustments, she watched me carefully through her glasses. "You're protecting yourself," she observed, not questioning my motives. "But this will leave him with nothing." Her voice was not judging, just factual. "He has taken far more than money," I answered. "This is balance, not punishment." Harper nodded. "Then every timestamp must be clear, every signature undeniable, every file logged, witnessed, and archived." So we prepared everything quietly. Adrian never read the documents I placed in front of him. He signed while talking, while drinking, while scrolling emails. I had spent years earning his trust. He believed I was incapable of deception. He believed women who loved deeply forgot how to think sharply. That was his first mistake. The second was believing no one around him was watching. Rowan began to visit more often, not with words or questions, just presence. Sometimes he sat in the studio room while I reviewed legal files, typing silently. Sometimes he placed a mug of tea beside my hand. His silence was not passive. It was steady, grounding. Once he said softly, "I wish you hadn't been the one to love him." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Some hearts choose wrong without realizing it until the bruise has already formed. Then there was Tessa. I did not discover her accidentally. Affection does not vanish from a man without reason. Love, when replaced, leaves a gap. And gaps are easy to follow. I saw the messages, the soft apologies, the blurred selfies sent under night shadows. Tessa Lynn worked for one of our collaborating agencies, a young woman with ambition bright enough to blind herself. She once admired me. I remembered her looking at me during project briefings, eyes shining, eager to learn. I had wanted to mentor her, but admiration turns easily into envy, and envy disguises itself as opportunity. I did not confront her. I did not confront either of them. A confrontation is only satisfying when emotion is the goal. I was past emotion. I was sculpting an ending. Instead, I let the relationship grow where it already was. I let them become comfortable, careless. I let their routines repeat until patterns formed, predictable, documented, time-stamped. I took my time collecting the quiet kind of evidence. Hotel receipts, voice messages backed up to secure drives, security footage from the garage where they thought no one watched. I never needed to expose her. I only needed the truth to be undeniable. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations moved forward beautifully. Flowers, venue rehearsals, seating charts. Adrian insisted on white roses, the kind that bruise easily when handled. A delicate flower chosen by a man who thought nothing in the world could ever bruise him. I hired a film crew, 2 camera operators, 1 sound engineer, 1 editor, to document the wedding as a personal memory project. They believed they were recording a celebration. They did not yet know their footage would become a testament. I instructed them on camera placement, 1 behind the stage, 1 facing the audience, both recording continuously. Nothing dramatic, just clarity waiting for its moment. The night before the wedding, I sat alone at my dining table, surrounded by silk ribbons and place cards bearing the names of people who believed they knew our story. The city outside was silent, streetlights reflecting on the glass like distant constellations. I held a glass of water in my hand, watching the ripples move with the slightest tremor of my fingers. I did not feel rage. I did not feel heartbreak. I felt something quiet and absolute, the final severing of hope. The version of me who once believed in love with him was gone, and in her place stood a woman who understood the cost of trusting the wrong person. That night, Rowan came by. He didn't knock loudly. He never did. When I opened the door, he simply looked at me, not asking, not pitying, just seeing me. He stepped inside and sat across from me. The air between us was full of things neither of us would ever say. "Tomorrow," he said eventually. "Are you ready?" "Yes," I replied. "For the first time, I am." He nodded slowly and reached across the table, his fingers just brushing mine, light, steady, warm. It was not romantic. It was something deeper. Recognition. The kind of connection born from 2 people standing in the same quiet wound. The morning of the wedding came with clear skies and gentle wind. I walked into the reception hall early, before anyone else, before music or chatter or movement. Rows of roses lined the aisle, soft and white and trembling in the early light. For a moment, I let myself remember the girl who once would have wept with happiness here. I placed her gently into the past. Gradually, guests arrived. Laughter, perfume, camera flashes. People telling me how radiant I looked, how perfect this day would be. I smiled politely, letting their words pass through me like echoes in someone else's memory. When Adrian arrived, he greeted guests like a prince. His smile was dazzling, his charm effortless. He did not notice how people's eyes slid from him to me, how quiet gravity had shifted. He did not see Rowan watching him from across the room, jaw set the way someone braces before a storm. The ceremony itself was beautiful, but beauty means nothing when the foundation beneath it is hollow. It was during the dinner toasts that everything began. Adrian raised his glass, drunk on attention and wine. He laughed too loudly, spoke with the easy arrogance of someone who has never feared consequence. And then he said it, the words that shattered the room, the words that became the match to the fuse I had laid in silence. I wouldn't be where I am without Lila, he said, smirking, though sometimes carrying her has felt like dragging a weight uphill. The room faltered. Laughter rose, scattered, uncomfortable. He believed it was only a joke. And that was exactly how I knew the time had come. I lifted my gaze. The moment of reckoning had finally arrived. The laughter died, the way candlelight gutters in a draft, a collective intake of breath turning the whole room thin and brittle. I stood, smoothed my dress with hands that did not tremble, and nodded to the AV booth. The house lights dipped. The screen behind Adrian flickered from a looping montage of us smiling in safer, older days to a darker frame. A garage camera, time-stamped, grainy but merciless. Tessa's coat. Adrian's hands. A kiss that did not belong to me. No soundtrack, no edits, no cruelty added. Just truth, patient and complete. Gasps rippled table to table. Someone dropped a fork. Evelyn's glass tilted in her hand. Red wine bleeding across the white linen like a wound that refused to be ignored. Adrian turned, stumbled a half step, then spun back toward me with a laugh that couldn't find footing. "This is fake," he barked, but the word died against the wall of silence. He lunged for a microphone, lying on a nearby chair, his voice cracking. "Lila, what is this? What game are you playing?" I took the second microphone offered by a staffer and spoke clearly. "It's not a game. It's the record." The screen shifted to a different image, a scanned document, the share transfer I had prepared with Harper, signatures enlarged until his looked like a confession, the seal, the notary line, the timestamp, line by line, the profit distribution, voting rights, intellectual property. The room followed the text as if it were scripture, all filed with the state registrar yesterday morning. I said softly, not to gloat, but to steady the narrative. Witnessed, logged, stored. I saw Rowan on the far side of the room. Still, watchful, present like a harbor light. Evelyn put her glass down and whispered to her son, not to me, "Adrian, what have you done?" He dragged a hand through his hair and turned on her, desperate. "She tricked me. You signed what you did not read," I said without heat. "The way you loved me, carelessly on autopilot, assuming I would carry what you ignored." He faced the guests again, smile pasted back on with trembling hands. "She's hysterical. Pre-wedding nerves. Everyone knows." I raised a hand, and the next slide appeared, a table of company transactions with blurred client names and clear outflows, the amount that had vanished, the shell invoices that had courage only on paper. No accusation, just ledger lines. "The money will be returned," I said. "The board has already been briefed. Your access was revoked at noon." A few of his friends stared at the documents like children confronted with the real shape of fire. Tessa stepped forward from the shadows of a column. Face pale, eyes searching for a version of the story that would spare her. Adrian, she whispered, reaching for him. He flinched and snapped without looking at her. Be quiet, she recoiled, and I felt something unexpected. A small ache for the girl who had wanted brightness so badly she mistook it for a mirror. No one made you who you are, I told him, my voice quiet enough that everyone leaned in. You became it step by step while I wasn't watching. That part is on me. He threw the microphone. It clattered across the marble with a sound that made everyone flinch. He moved toward me, and Rowan was there in a breath between us, his palm on Adrian's chest, gentle, unmoving. That's enough, Rowan said, not loudly but with a gravity that left no room for argument. Adrian's eyes flashed. You always wanted what I had. Rowan didn't look away. I never wanted what you had. I wanted you to be better than this. The room held very still. The lights hummed. The roses on the tables smelled suddenly too sweet. For a suspended second, time felt fragile, like glass forced to bear more weight than it should. Then I exhaled, stepped around both brothers, and faced the guests. I'm sorry for the spectacle. I said, you came to celebrate a union. You deserve honesty instead. A few people stood as if to leave, uncertain where to put their hands or their sympathy, but most stayed, tethered by the same thing that had held me together these last few months, the need to let truth finish what it starts. The marriage will not proceed, I added, simple as a signed receipt. The business will continue under its original mandate. Salaries are guaranteed. Projects remain in motion. Our legal counsel will circulate a memo on Monday. Harper, seated near the back, inclined her head once. It was the only salute I needed. You'll regret this, Adrian hissed. Everyone will see what you are. They're seeing it now, I replied. I turned to the crew and made a small motion with my hand. The screen went black. The house lights lifted slowly. The spell broke, not with applause or shouting, but with the soft scrape of chairs and the quiet murmur of people finding their coats, their spouses, themselves. Evelyn rose, smoothing a wrinkle that didn't exist. For the first time, she looked at me without the gauze of disdain. Ms. Moreno, she said, voice steadier than her hands, I underestimated you. You misread me, I corrected, because there was no victory in conquest here, only the evenness of a ledger balanced. She nodded once, a concession and a farewell, and followed her son, who was already pushing through the far doors as if distance were a cure. Tessa lingered by a pillar, eyes shining with something complicated. I didn't mean, I know, I said. Meaning well is not the same as doing right. Take care of yourself. She pressed her lips together hard, then slipped away, the click of her heels absorbed by the carpet. Guests filtered out. A few old clients squeezed my hand, awkward in their care. One of my junior designers wrapped me in a brief hug and whispered, "Thank you." It took me a heartbeat to understand she meant for the clarity, not the scene. When the hall was nearly empty, I walked to the stage. A white rose had fallen, near the footlight, petals bruised at the edges. I picked it up, turned it in my fingers, and set it gently on the rail. Rowan stood at the bottom of the steps, waiting, not hovering, not rescuing. Waiting the way a shore waits for tide. Steady, without demand. "Are you all right?" he asked. I considered the question like a contract I would someday have to honor. "I'm intact," I said. Sometimes that's the first version of all right. He half smiled, a shape that didn't reach for more than it was offered. "Do you want company while you close things down?" I looked out over the room. Glasses half full, napkins folded like surrendered flags, the ghost of music still hanging in the rafters. "Yes," I said, "but not to be held up, to be witnessed." "Perfect," he answered, as if that were a role he had long prepared for. We moved through the space together, practical, and quiet. I thanked the crew and handed the lead a sealed envelope addressed to Harper. If anything goes missing, I told him, deliver this. He didn't ask what anything meant. Professionals learn the weight of unsaid specifics. In the bridal room, I unpinned the veil, laid it across a chair, and stared at my reflection. Hair loosened, eyes clear, mouth unpainted by any version of relief. I had expected to feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt returned to myself, like finding a key where you knew it would be all along, under the plant on the windowsill, dusty but faithful. On the balcony, the city was breathing, cars threading the night, a siren far off and uninterested in our drama. Rowan joined me, leaning on the rail beside me, without touching. He'll spiral, he said, finally. He'll also land. People like Adrian don't shatter. They reassemble into whatever will carry them forward. And you, I asked, how do you land? His laugh was soft. By not pretending I wasn't part of it. I saw him slipping. I didn't say more. I told myself it wasn't my business. It was kind to stay out. I said, it wasn't kind, he answered. It was easy. We stood there a long while, not as confessions, not as promises, simply as two people who had chosen to watch the same horizon. When we finally left, the night felt cleaner than it had when we entered, a wind moving through the corridor as if the building itself exhaled. In the days that followed, the work was exacting. Harper filed what needed filing. Our head of finance initiated the clawbacks. The board convened and voted to remove Adrian from his role. The minutes were brisk, the vote uneven only in how much pity to put on the record. Statements were drafted, internal first, public only when necessary. I arrived early every morning, power walked the hallway with a coffee in hand, and met with teams who looked at me with something I hadn't expected. Not sympathy, not awe, trust. The kind that grows in the same place where fear used to live. Adrian tried, of course. Emails that performed contrition. Legal threats that bluffed power.